Jack Douglas first met John Lennon in 1971 as an engineer on the album entitled Imagine. He produced his last album, Double Fantasy, and was with the musician and his wife last night. He is joining us this evening to discuss the plans that John Lennon had for the 1980s and the optimism he had going into a new decade with a revived career. He did see the 70s as being a time off, didn't he? He was looking forward really to doing something completely different during the 1980s.
Well, he saw the beginning of the 70s, as we all did, as a time for me, a time for us all to say, no, I'm going to do something for me. I've spent the 60s fighting for the cause, whatever cause it was. And he was looking at the 80s as a time to say, I'm going to do something for me, but I'm not going to step on anyone else to do it. I'm not going to exclude anyone else. And that's what he was looking for in the 80s.
What kinds of plans did he have, Jack? What was he looking forward to?
Well, I think the first single off the album, which was called Starting Over, which we picked while we were doing the album, was the feeling that he wanted to have for the 80s, that we are, in fact, in the 80s, we are starting over, that it's time to be optimistic about the future, that it's time to write off George Orwell in 1984. It's time to forget about those things, that in 84 we can have what we want if we work together and for ourselves. There were other songs on that particular album that represented what he wanted to do and what he wanted others to do. For instance, Cleanup Time. What he was trying to say is that it's time to forget about drugs. It's time to forget about alcohol. It's time to take a look at what you have around you, your family, and to take advantage of it, because those are things that are really meaningful.
In watching the replay of the interview, I was interested when he and I were talking about the possession of marijuana, and he kept referring to it dope, 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 and I was thinking to myself, and we've all fooled around with that stuff, a little grass now and again, or alcohol, booze, whatever. If it's all so great, why do they call it dope? It makes you dopey when you stop and think about it. If it's so great, why do they call it dope? It was interesting to hear him talking about that.
That's true.
He must have been very pleased, and yourself as well, that the album Double Fantasy was a tremendous success. I believe it's gold already, heading for platinum. Well, the response to it was remarkable.
In fact, yesterday while we were working, David Geffen came up to the control room.
Now, identify him for me.
David is the president of Geffen Records, okay, on which John's album is distributed. And he came up and he said, "Well, congratulations, boys! Mm-hmm. 2 weeks out, and your album is gold and quickly headed for platinum, and the single is going to #1." And John was just thrilled. I mean, he's been there many times before, but after 5 years, he just jumped up and down like a kid. He was.
During the production of the album, was there any negative anticipation? Gee, we've been away for 5 years. Maybe it won't be so successful so
absolutely.
Quickly. Jitters, really.
John was definitely one to play himself down. He didn't consider himself John Lennon superstar. Mm-hmm. But more John Lennon artist, hoping that other people would understand what he was trying to say. He didn't take it for granted that people would just go out and buy his records. He hoped they would. But when it was starting to happen the way it was, he was just thrilled. He was like a kid. He was very happy. And on top of that, yesterday, we had just finished mixing a new tune for Yoko.
Could I interrupt you for just a couple of minutes? I got a
Certainly.
Commercial to do. We'll continue with Mr. Jack Douglas right after these announcements. Thank you. Spending a little time here with Mr. Jack Douglas, who is the producer of Double Fantasy, the Lennon's most recent album. Go ahead. In 1968, you came into the business as a producer. You were just...
I was a musician before that, and in 1968, I was part of the smoke dope, take acid generation, riot in the street, and go mad. And I was listening to that White Album, and I said, by God, what I really want to do is produce records. I said, that's really what I want. And I said, there's probably nothing more than I'd want to do is produce the Beatles or produce John Lennon. And then after a lot of hard work, being janitor in a studio and finally becoming an engineer and working with John in '71, there was an immediate communication, almost the kind of communication that a fan feels when he listens to a Beatle record.
Mm.
It was there. It was there when I met him. There was an instant warmth, and we became very close. And then I started working with Yoko. Now, previous to that, the engineers who were working with Yoko were running out of the control room when she was starting to work. But I understood what she was trying to do, and it was appreciated by both John and Yoko. And we did a lot of work together. And after the 5 years, I was coming back from Los Angeles, and I got a telephone call from Yoko, and she said, John and I want to go back, and we'd like you to produce. And my first reaction was, hallelujah, but not because I was producing the album, but because he was going back to work.
Yeah.
And I think after I hung up the phone, I realized, wow, they've asked me to do it. I mean, that's truly amazing.
How did you get through the night last night, young man?
I didn't get through the night, really. After returning from the hospital, I went for a walk all the way down to Grand Central Station. I live uptown, and I hung around Grand Central Station for a while, and tried to make sense out of a completely senseless act as best I could, because I had just left him at 10:30,
Mm-hmm.
and we were feeling really up. We were meeting again at 10 o'clock in the morning to continue our work. We were feeling really good. The album was gold. It was on its way to platinum. Yoko was receiving the kind of press that we had prayed for, and that was making John very happy. And everything was going well. And after it happened, I heard about 20 minutes later. Usually, because I only live 2 blocks from John, I ride uptown with them every night in the limo. But I had another session after that one, and I was in my session. I was told that John had been shot, and we just immediately went to Roosevelt Hospital, and of course it wasn't long after that we realized he was dead. And I spent the rest of the night in the streets, just trying to communicate with him in some way.
There's no way that you'll ever make sense out of it, but carry the message for him, which I think he would have wanted you to do.
That's what I mean, and that's why I'm here. I don't think I could be here any other way except to say that he meant the 80s to be optimistic, and that he wanted to tell everyone that it's going to be all right if we pull together.
Thank you for coming here tonight. I'm really up against the clock, but my deepest sympathies to you and to the family, and thank you so much for coming here this evening.
Thank you.
I've got to do this commercial. We'll be right back. We'll get back on the track tomorrow night. I thank you all for being with us this evening, and from New York City, thanks for watching. Good night, everybody.